There are currently nearly 18,000 self-catering properties in Scotland, ranging from B&Bs to Airbnbs. But for a few years now, concerns have been raised by residents who believe that short-term lets are responsible for increased antisocial behaviour and a spike in house prices, particularly in our cities. The Scottish Government has been setting up this new licensing scheme which would allow local authorities to have new powers to ask for planning permission before properties are rented out. Now, some of the draft consultation is here on this website and it is lengthy. It's also asking for safety requirements for short-term lets. But all of this is exactly what some of Scotland's leading tourism organisations have been fighting back against. Now, a number of them who were part of a working group looking at this issue have resigned. They believe their needs are being ignored. David Weston is one of those who has stepped back.
We think that the way they're going about it is a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and it's going to bring in under its wing thousands of tiny B&Bs, guest houses, who are complying with the law already, and yet they're now going to be hit with very heavy costs and an onerous legislation.
It's estimated that the industry is worth £1 billion to the Scottish economy, and those on all sides are keen to find a resolution.
It's really pushed up prices in the rental market, it's pushed up prices in the buying market, so it's making it more difficult for people to buy their own home in Edinburgh. It's also making it more difficult for people to afford to rent within our city. And it's just making it more difficult for people to find the accommodation that's right for them.
Many owners of self-catering accommodation now wait anxiously to see what the Scottish Government's next steps could be. A recent survey showed nearly half of them would be forced to leave the sector if the licensing comes into force. Hope Webb, BBC News.
Well, in response, the Scottish Government has sent us a statement. In it, they say they have been clear since January 2020 that regulation of short-term lets would include a licensing scheme. And they go on to say it's surprising, therefore, that these organisations have chosen to leave at this stage on the grounds they're progressing with licensing rather than registration. Well, let's discuss this more with Fiona Campbell from the Association of Scotland's Self-Caterers. Fiona, welcome to the programme and thanks for your time. Your organisation is one of those that has dropped out. Just explain why to us.
It is, and it's incredibly regrettable because we spent the last 4.5 years working constructively and positively with the Scottish Government and the working group and its predecessors, who is led by the More Homes Division, which is important to note on this. And we've provided all sorts of empirical data and positive, proportionate solutions to the various difficulties that they're facing. Now, what we're faced with now is that after 4.5 years, they have simply not listened. They have not listened to any of our comments. They've not listened to any of our concerns. And when the legislation was withdrawn in February with cross-party support because it was not fit for purpose, it is now being presented again, even worse. They have not even looked at any of our concerns. So we feel that we are simply not being listened to. And one of our biggest concerns in all of this is it is now to do with housing. There is no demonstrable link between a housing shortage and short-term letting, or let me explain, professional self-catering or bed and breakfast in Scotland. And we are really concerned that the Scottish Government is simply not supporting small and micro businesses across the length and breadth of Scotland with this legislation.
OK, so do you feel potentially that everyone's kind of been grouped in under the one banner and that isn't exactly what should be happening at the moment? Is that what you're trying to say there?
Absolutely, 100%. We have to understand the difference between amateur operators who work with collaborative economy platforms and professional people that run businesses, giving amazing, wonderful accommodation experiences across the length and breadth of Scotland. This is their livelihoods.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you just clarify that? I mean, are we talking about, you know, the Airbnbs of this world compared to the B&Bs or self-caterers, for example?
There are lots of different marketing platforms. Airbnb is one of them. It is deeply unfair to constantly call them out as the bad boys. But what is happening is that the very professional operators that have been operating professionally for decades in Scotland are being swept up in this legislation when we are already regulated in terms of health and safety to the same standards as bed and breakfast, hotels and guest houses. So to suggest that this is about basic health and safety legislation and regulations is duplicitous.
Okay.
It's disingenuous.
You can hear your frustrations, but would it not be better to stay in the room rather than effectively storming out of it if you do want to make change?
We definitely didn't storm anywhere. As I say, we've been constructive and positive and proactive in all of our suggestions for 4.5 years. We first suggested registration with health and safety, plus licensing in areas of demonstrable link between short-term letting and housing stock in 2017. This could be delivered by the Development of Tourism Act 1969 with no additional legislation. This could have been done in 2017 or 2018. But the fact is nobody has listened to us. So you get to a point where you think, well, I can carry on bashing my head off a brick wall, but there's no point. Nobody's listening. We need to actually take this back to the drawing board and actually work out what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Because we can't solve anything without data. Policymakers have a responsibility to solve issues with empirical data underpinning it.
Okay.
And that is not what's happening here.
Okay, well, as I say, the Scottish Government say they are disappointed that you've decided not to continue with your participation in the working group.
We will happily come back to the table, delighted to come back to the table if meaningful engagement is promised.
Okay, Fiona Campbell from the Association of Self-Caterers, thanks so much for your time tonight.
You're watching